Okay, everybody, ready for a challenge? We are going to make implied texture that is a knitted texture. A texture that is created when yarn is woven together to make something like a mitten or a glove. Whether you decide to create a mitten or a glove today, you need to write your name and code on your paper and flip it over. Next, you are going to trace your hand. Make sure that you don't let your palm hang off the bottom of the paper. Make sure your hand is right about in the middle. Let's start with how to create a mitten first. Mittens have all the fingers together, but the thumbs sticking out. We're not going to draw a tight bubble around our hands. We're going to draw a big bubble around our hands in this position. That way our gloves look more cozy. Also, make sure that your lines hit the bottom of the paper. Don't have a floating mitten. Next, let's talk about how to trace your hand in a glove shape. Instead of just having your thumb stick out, you're going to spread all your fingers out. Make sure your hand's about in the middle of the paper and all your fingers fit inside. And then draw a large bubble around each finger. And each line, again, each end of your line needs to hit the bottom of the paper. It looks way bigger than a normal hand. That's just to make it look more fluffy and cozy. More texture, if you will. Let's start decorating our glove or mitten with some implied texture. A lot of mittens and gloves have something called a cuff. Draw a line across the wrist of your glove or mitten, and then fill it with wavy lines like this. If you make a mistake at all during this whole drawing, you know you can use the eraser to erase and fix. Now let's do the challenging part. On the mitten or the glove, you are going to draw straight vertical lines. They need to be the same width apart every time. You might want to use your pencil to measure it and help you draw the lines evenly. And another tip is to hold down the paper with your other hand as you draw. It keeps the paper in one place so that you have an anchor and you're not just floating out there trying to draw these straight lines. My lines are looking pretty good, but I think that I made this space too small. So I'm going to add another line to even that out. And next, it's time to add the grains of rice to create the knitted texture. Take a close look at what I do. Each row of rice needs to come in at an angle, like this, from the corner of the paper. It's not going to be straight side to side or straight up and down. Each grain of rice needs to be diagonal. And they need to all match. Remember when we created the bumpy texture on our corn? And we made our circle squares smaller as the shape got smaller? You're going to do the same thing with your grains of rice. They're not really grains of rice. I'm just calling them that because they really look like that. But these shapes are what we're going to use to create the implied knitted texture. I'm going to fill up this row and quit yapping. Notice all my grains of rice are diagonal and there is no space between them. That's really important to make it really look knitted, to trick the eye. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier because for the next row, yes, the rice needs to be diagonal, but it needs to be in the opposite direction of that first row. Okay, now that my hand is out of the way, you can see that the next set of rice grains are in the opposite direction. So instead of tilting up, like the first row did, they are actually tilting down to the right. And each grain of rice that I drew in the first row has a matching grain of rice in the second row. Trying your best to stick to that really helps create this texture here. Now I'm going to fill in the top and bottom. They don't have any matching rice grains from the first row because the first row was shorter. So I'm just going to wing it. Yes, it is looking so good. I'm already seeing how it looks like a knitted texture. But as you keep going and going, it becomes more and more clear. It's very cool. For my next row, I'm going to do the opposite direction of rice. And I'm going to try my best to match each rice grain in the last row that I did with my new rice grains. This takes a while, you guys. But if you really focus just on this, don't think about anything you're upset about, don't think about anything you're worried about, tests, what color you're on today. Just take your time and draw these rice grains. That's all you need to think about right now. It's part of being mindful. If you focus, you can actually really enjoy yourself drawing these grains of rice. My next row is tilting downward to continue with the pattern. So far, my first row pointed up, second row down, third row up, fourth row down. Check it out. Up, down, up will be the next direction of my rice. Looks like if I touched this mitten it would feel knitted, like yarn that's woven together, but it's not. It's a pencil drawing. Implied texture. I'm going to draw a zigzag line to show you the direction of each of my rows, and voila, there it is. I have one more row to go and they're going to be pointing downward. And after this, we're done with implied texture. Like forever this year, we're done. We're gonna move on to something called form. Form is when something is three-dimensional. It's not flat. It pops out. It has form. So next, we're going to color this mitten and add a snowflake that has real form to it. It's going to be amazing. Can't wait.